Ladies and gentlemen, we find ourselves standing once again at the precipice of a profound uncertainty, gazing into the abyss of a negotiation that has seemingly ceased to function. We have received an update on the collective bargaining discourse between the Women's National Basketball Association and its players, though to call it an update is perhaps to lend it a dynamism it currently lacks. It would be more accurate to describe the current state of affairs as a calcification, a hardening of positions that has left the league and its labor force suspended in a perilous state of stasis. We are, to put it bluntly, no further along the path to resolution than we were when this tumultuous process began. The word being whispered in the corridors of power, and indeed shouted in the analysis of the situation, is stalemate. And we must ask ourselves, why has this paralysis taken hold? The answer lies in a fundamental divergence of economic reality. The ownership groups of the WNBA, and by extension their counterparts in the NBA, have reached a point of immovability. They are refusing, and one might argue quite rationally, to entertain a financial structure that they view as fundamentally ruinous. They are resisting what can only be described as a proposal detached from the fiscal gravity of the business itself. Let us dissect the core of this disagreement, for it is not merely a matter of percentage points, but a clash of philosophies.
Got to talk about the WNBA because you have been a key voice in the negotiations with the Players Association. Is there any update that you can give us on the process right now?
Not right now. We're a little bit of a standstill. Our timeline is coming up in a couple of days. It's going to expire. But I think we're just excited to show at Unrivaled that it is possible to pay the players and create a successful business. And that's what we hope to do in the WNBA as well. But I think we're exemplifying that here at Unrivaled, that it is possible. So we're excited to reach negotiations. No one wants a work stoppage, but we do feel, really confident in what we're asking for. And I just feel really blessed to be able to play and create something that is already showing that these things are possible.
Yes, and you are showing that it's possible with Unrivaled. The fans that you have, the players who have had long-term commitments, have signed multi-year contracts with Unrivaled. But is there anything that is missing from the conversations with the WNBA? Anything that's missing in those conversations that you've been having?
I would say just, we've been at the table a long time. It's been a little bit over a year. And I think just the willingness to create something new with the players is what we're really looking for right now. We're confident that we're going to get there. I know from our side, we're standing strong on what we were asking for. And I feel good that it's going to happen.
The Players Association is advocating for a revenue-sharing model that demands 30% of gross revenue. Now, in the abstract, numbers on a page can appear benign, but in the practical application of business economics, this demand is being viewed by the league not just as ambitious, but as an existential threat to the solvency of the franchises. The league has articulated a counterposition that is rooted in the harsh soil of the balance sheet. If they were to acquiesce to this gross revenue model, the owners would essentially be contractually obligated to continue losing money in perpetuity. Consider, if you will, the visual representation of this economic proposal. I ask you, as rational observers of commerce, how many of you would willingly reach into your own pockets, withdraw your hard-earned capital, pile it in the center of the street, douse it in accelerant, and ignite a flame simply to watch it turn to ash? I venture to guess that precisely 0% of you would find wisdom in such an act. It is an exercise in futility, a ritual of financial self-immolation. Yet, this is the very scenario the players' current proposal invites the owners to continue. The owners are being asked to maintain a system where their investment is incinerated, all while guaranteeing a percentage of the gross intake to the labor force before a single bill is paid or a single profit is realized. To their credit, and it is a credit that must be acknowledged, the ownership groups have finally signaled that enough is enough. They have drawn a line in the sand, driven by a newfound resolve. The message is unequivocal. Either we construct a deal that is mutually beneficial, a deal that respects the basic tenets of profitability and sustainability, or the enterprise simply cannot continue in its current form. It is a moment of stark clarity in a history often muddied by subsidies and goodwill. This impasse brings into sharp relief the strategic miscalculation made by the players when they opted to terminate the previous collective bargaining agreement ahead of schedule. One must question the wisdom of such precipitous action. They chose to abandon the existing framework before they had gathered the necessary data to bolster their case. We are standing on the cusp of a new era, fueled largely by the arrival of Caitlin Clark and the subsequent media rights explosion. Yet, the union chose to negotiate before seeing the full financial picture of a league with a healthy Caitlin Clark, before the gate revenues and broadcast metrics of a complete, star-driven season could be tabulated. They are negotiating based on hope and projection rather than the concrete data of a transformed economic landscape. Instead of waiting a year to see if the anomalies of 2024 and 2025 were sustainable trends or mere flashes in the pan, they forced a confrontation. And now they face the uncomfortable truth that the historical data currently on the books is far from flattering. It paints a portrait of a league that, quite frankly, looks terrible on the ledger. We look to the reporting from major outlets like ESPN, which confirms the depth of this freeze. Since the soft deadline passed on January 9th, the two sides have entered a period described as status quo. For weeks, there has been silence. The stalemate persists. The Players Association sits in wait for an official response to a proposal sent a month ago, while the league, in a move of profound dismissal, has essentially communicated that the proposal does not warrant a counteroffer. The league's stance is that the union's demands were so fundamentally unchanged from previous, rejected iterations that they do not merit the dignity of a new debate. Sources indicate the league is waiting for the players to return to the table with anything that resembles reality. There is a growing understanding articulated by sources close to the negotiations that the only path forward is through compromise. As one player astutely noted, that is literally what negotiation is. Yet the definition of compromise seems to be lost in translation. The league is willing to discuss a 70-30 split, but with a critical distinction. They are talking about net revenue. They are offering to share the spoils only after the bills have been paid, only after the enterprise turns a profit over the lifetime of the agreement. This is a model based on actual success, not theoretical entitlement. The players, however, remain entrenched in their demand for 30% of the gross, and sources indicate that the owners are unlikely to yield on this point. This is the immovable object meeting the unstoppable force. The league has stated its dual priorities. Yes, they wish to increase player compensation, but they must also shift the paradigm from decades of operating at a staggering loss to a future of sustained profitability. They need to incentivize the owners to keep investing, to keep pouring water into the well. But the owners have signaled that the days of blind investment are over. They will not pour more capital into this league until they can see a viable path to a return on that investment. We must recall the sobering financial realities revealed in 2024. Even amidst the hype, even with the surge in interest, the league still posted a loss of $40 million. The owners are, to use the vernacular, officially pissed. They are tired of the narrative that they are hoarding wealth when, in fact, they are subsidizing a product that has never stood on its own 2 feet. This brings us to the rhetoric being deployed by the players, specifically the phrase that their proposal represents our value. I feel compelled to address this terminology, for it is symptomatic of a broader cultural malaise. We hear often these days of my truth. It is a phrase that seeks to elevate subjective feeling to the level of objective fact. But let us be rigorous in our thinking. There is no your truth. There is simply the truth. Reality is not a buffet from which we can select the facts that please us. When the players assert that a percentage of gross revenue represents their value, they are making a claim that is divorced from economic evidence. In a professional setting, one's value is inextricably linked to the revenue one can generate and the profit one can secure for the entity. Frankly, nobody truly knows what that value is yet, because the league has never operated in the green. This is the crux of the problem. By demanding payment based on a value that has not yet been realized in dollars and cents, the players are negotiating against a ghost. Furthermore, we must address the ancillary demands that are cluttering this negotiation, specifically the issue of housing. The players are seeking a middle ground where the league continues to subsidize their living arrangements. I must ask, with all due respect to the parties involved, at what point does personal responsibility enter the equation? Under the proposed terms of the New Deal, we are looking at average salaries climbing toward $500,000, with the potential for total compensation to reach nearly $2 million by the end of the next CBA. If an individual is earning $500,000 annually, is it unreasonable to expect them to procure their own shelter? We are not speaking of minimum wage laborers here. We are speaking of professional athletes entering a new tax bracket. The notion that the employer must still pay for the housing of an employee earning $500,000 is a relic of a time when the salaries were meager. That time is passing. If the players wish to cohabitate to save funds, that is their prerogative, and perhaps, given the camaraderie of the league, preferable. But to demand that the owners foot the bill for housing on top of a massive salary increase is to demand the perks of an amateur while receiving the pay of a professional. Are they expecting a Marriott suite for the entire year? If you are moving from a $100,000 salary to a $500,000 salary, surely you can navigate the rental market. You can find a respectable apartment for $2,000 a month and manage your own affairs. This demand speaks to a desire for the benefits of wealth without the accompanying independence that wealth should provide. The consequences of this stalemate are real and immediate. The mechanisms of the league are grinding to a halt. Free agency, a time of excitement and renewal, is frozen. The expansion draft, a critical tool for the league's growth, is in limbo. We are paralyzed. And as the days tick by, the specter of a strike looms larger and larger on the horizon. I am beginning to sense with an increasing degree of certainty that a work stoppage is coming. And if we do reach that precipice, if the arenas go dark and the games cease, let there be no ambiguity about where the burden of responsibility lies. If you lose basketball, it is because the players refuse to accept a victory. The owners have offered significantly more money, a transformative amount of money compared to previous eras. They have put millions on the table. The rational move, the strategic move, would be to sign a shorter deal, perhaps 3 years. Take the money, get the players back on the court, let the Caitlin Clark era fully blossom, gather the data, prove the profitability, and then return to the table with a handful of aces. Instead, the union seems intent on playing a pair of twos as if it were a royal flush. The tragedy here is that this intransigence appears to be driven by a specific segment of the labor force, the veteran players. These are individuals who feel, perhaps with some emotional justification, that they were underpaid for a decade. They believe their value should have been recognized 10 years ago, and they are attempting to retroactively capture that lost income in this new deal. They are trying to make up for lost time because their careers are nearing their twilight. But economics does not work retroactively. You cannot demand payment today for the perceived injustices of yesterday, especially when that demand threatens the viability of the league for the players of tomorrow. By holding out for a make-whole, contract, these veterans are jeopardizing the windfall that awaits the next generation. We are watching a high-stakes game of chicken played against a backdrop of financial fragility. The owners have signaled that they are done burning cash. The players are demanding a share of a pie that hasn't even been baked. And in the middle, the future of the league hangs in the balance. At the very least, the players have hedged their bets. They have the unrivaled league, which provides a financial cushion for some. They have the Project B initiatives. They have the overseas markets. They have avenues to sustain themselves if they choose to blow up the WNBA season. But let us not pretend that such an outcome would be anything other than a catastrophic failure of leadership and a profound misreading of the room. The owners have extended a hand with a check that reflects a new reality. It may not be the blank check the union desires, but it is a check that clears. To reject it in favor of a theoretical valuation that exists only in the minds of the negotiators is to risk everything. The truth, the objective, undeniable truth, is that the money is there. It is on the table. The question remains, will wisdom prevail, or will the desire for my truth lead the league into a darkness from which it may struggle to emerge? Tell me what you truly think. Are the players marching toward a cliff of their own making? Or is this brinksmanship necessary to break the cycle of the past? Let us know your thoughts. The story is evolving, the stalemate is deepening, and the clock is ticking. Peace. I'm out. Until next time.